Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. President Joe Biden just wrapped up a primetime address to the nation from the Oval Office, touting the debt ceiling deal that he brokered with Speaker Kevin McCarthy this week. A lot of attention has been focused on the swift passage of that bill in the House on Wednesday, the Senate late last night, large bipartisan majorities. While that's been happening, Special Counsel Jack Smith has been barreling ahead with his investigation of the ex-president, now the leading contender for the Republican nomination in 2024. Earlier this week, we learned that Smith had obtained a key new piece of evidence in the case of Donald Trump's handling of classified documents. He is now in possession of an audio recording in which Trump acknowledges he held onto a classified Pentagon document about a potential attack on Iran. On that recording from a July 2021 meeting at his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club, Trump began railing about his hand-picked chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, who was described in media accounts at the time as having guarded against Trump's striking Iran in the final days of his presidency. New York Times reports the ex-president then began referencing a document that he had with him, saying that it had been compiled by General Milley and was related to attacking Iran. According to new reporting just out this afternoon, Trump's attorneys have not found that classified document in question, even after receiving a subpoena specifically for it earlier this year. So where is it now? We don't know. But I think this new information that we got yesterday about this recording and the context of the document and Mark Milley finally clarifies a key question, the question around Donald Trump's motive for holding on to these many classified documents after he left the White House. In a strictly legal sense, the motive doesn't actually matter. In order to file criminal charges, the special counsel just has to believe that a crime was committed and the evidence is strong enough to lead to a conviction that will hold up upon appeal. But of course, juries, us and the public, do want to know why. Like, why would he do this? And the question of why the ex-president took these documents and then refused to give them back and apparently obstructed attempts to get them back so far has not been clear. I mean, there's been a few theories. So some people have suggested, floated this, not based on any evidence, just as a theory, right, that Trump had a corrupt financial incentive, that he wanted to sell the information he'd taken to foreign interests. And I have to say, that always struck me as pretty unlikely. I mean, I think that would be a more complicated, high-risk play than Donald Trump is equipped to even attempt. Then there's another theory, a suggestion that he kept the documents because the guy's just a pack rat who really likes souvenirs. And I have to say, that's been kind of my leading belief. It seems totally plausible. I mean, just given the state of his office in Trump Tower.
This office
right
is all you, and it's a little bit junky.
Yeah. You know what? This I just got a few weeks ago. This is from the Marine Corps. That's the chair for The Apprentice that I used.
Oh, wow.
These are different things. Tom Brady's Super Bowl helmet.
Wow.
This is Mike Tyson's belt. This is Vince McMahon from the World Wrestling Federation. This is Shaquille O'Neal's shoe.
Oh, my God.
Right here, which is a serious shoe.
Is that a real shoe?
That's a real shoe. He took it off after a game and handed it to me.
Oh, my God.
I carried it like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think that's a bit, right? That's not a bit. This is a guy who really, really likes knickknacks and memorabilia, and he likes to show them off to people. I mean, do you remember that he even stuck an empty classified folder that he'd clearly taken from this time of the presidency in a display case at the bar at Trump Tower? So keeping the dozens of classified documents that went in those folders could just be his, like, presidential version of Mike Tyson memorabilia. It's possible. But again, I mean, this might be the reason, but when you take a step back, it is a lot of time and effort and legal risk and legal bills for what amount to a bunch of souvenirs. Which brings us to why the new reporting about the Pentagon document Trump talked about on tape is, to me, so revealing, almost kind of a light bulb moment in understanding this. As the New York Times mentioned in their reporting in the summer of 2021, there were several news stories about how General Mark Milley was working to prevent Donald Trump from attacking Iran in the last months of his presidency. This one from The New Yorker explained that as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley had been engaged in an alarmed effort to ensure that Trump did not embark on a military conflict with Iran as part of his quixotics campaign to overturn the results of the 2020 election and remain in power. The chairman secretly feared that Trump would insist on launching a strike on Iranian interests that could set off a full-blown war. Now, Donald Trump absolutely hated that story. He brought it up in that recorded meeting, railing against General Milley, and he claimed the document that he had, right, the classified document he'd taken, again, according to reporting on the recording, that document, he says Milley wrote that would undermine the general story. Right? How could Donald Trump have been working against, how could Milley have been working against attacking Iran when he wrote the plan of how to do it? Now, again, to be clear, this is all, I think, misleading and bluster. The military has contingency plans for pretty much everything, including probably a war with Iran. Sources have also told multiple news outlets that Milley did not actually write that report. But in Donald Trump's point of view, that document was his ammunition to settle his score with the general. And that is the motive that really makes sense to me. Not that he just plucked documents randomly as souvenirs, though maybe he did that, but that he took them specifically as receipts. If he has the documents in his possession, he can wield the information they contain as leverage. The information in those classified documents is powerful. That is why the entire complicated, overly complicated system of classification exists. It is why the world of intelligence agencies exists, to extract information against the will of other states, because that information is useful and it is powerful. Donald Trump would want that secret information for the same reason a spy might want it, to use it to his advantage against his enemies. That motive fits perfectly within Donald Trump's character. I don't know if it's the motive, but it's the first time a possible motive makes the whole situation snap into focus for me. And the recording about this one document may be the final piece of the puzzle falling into place in special counsel Jack Smith's investigation.